what are PFAS chemicals?
Yeah, PFAS is important to everybody. Forever Chemicals, it's been in the news a bunch. We have been working on AFFF in firefighter cases. Firefighters get cancer and various illnesses because of PFAS, but now we're doing work for municipalities and PFAS in the water supplies, working with Mike Stagg, mostly around New York State, but really there's clients all over the country. These are a group of man-made chemicals, and they don't break down. That's why they call them Forever Chemicals.
And what are the PFAS chemicals used for?
The biggest use, I think, is firefighting foam. Puts out high-temperature fires of jet fuel, things like that. So instead of spraying water on a fire, you spray this chemical. It doesn't break down. It suffocates the fire goes out. Also appears in things like outdoor rugs, waterproof clothing, Teflon cookware, but there's an awful lot of it in various water supplies, and because it doesn't break down. So I believe a lot of that is from firefighting foam. The firefighting foam, usually in training centers, gets sprayed on the ground, percolates through the ground, gets into the water supply, and just doesn't break down. So wherever it accumulates, we're on Lake Ontario here. There's PFAS in Lake Ontario and other Great Lakes.
So what does PFAS do to your body?
Yeah, so there's, at this point, I think, indisputable evidence that PFAS has negative impacts on your body. PFAS has been around for a while. We've known about it. Firefighting foam came out in the 60s. Widespread use, probably in the 40s, was created. But so when I was in law school about 20 years ago, people knew that Teflon got PFAS into your blood, and the defense was, well, it doesn't do anything. And it pretty clearly is related to various illnesses, testicular cancer, thyroid disease, various others. And the real question is, where's the line? There's 5 or 6 that are certainly related to PFAS exposure, and there's, I think, pretty good evidence that prostate cancer can be related to PFAS exposure. And where the line is, I think, is what we're litigating right now.
I'm sure there's probably more. You just don't know about it yet.
Yeah, and we can put a list up on the screen. Sometimes they call them the leach injuries. That was a famous case about 20 years ago. There was a community that was exposed to tremendous amounts of PFAS, and their levels of 6 illnesses, everything from high cholesterol to kidney cancer, ulcerative colitis. So that's almost like a case study for a whole community, about 3,500 people. They call them the leach injuries, and those are, I think, widely accepted as definitely related to PFAS, and then there's some others that I think the science shows are also related. So
tell me again, what kind of products contain PFAS?
Yeah, some makeup has PFAS. Anything that has water from a municipal water source, there's trace elements of PFAS in a lot of water. And I think we're representing a lot of municipalities, and I hope kind of the public views what has happened as a success. There are low levels of PFAS in a lot of water supplies, and the action that's been taken really by plaintiffs' lawyers, and to the credit of the defendants, they've accepted responsibility and have agreed to pay settlements before it got too bad. We're talking about some of our municipalities, 1, 2, 3 parts per trillion, and scientists will say that's 1 drop in 20 swimming pools. And it's still serious. The FDA and the EPA, they're talking about a level of 4 parts per trillion is acceptable. So these municipalities are under that, but.
Well, it's interesting because I don't think I even told you. I was away, and when you go to the grocery store and you buy the prepared foods, and then you go and sit down, and they have the forks and the knives and the plates, whatever you need. There were plates there that said PFAS free. I was like, what?
Well, there's a kind of a famous class action going on right now. It's the orange juice case, Simply Orange.
Yeah.
And the class action is it's not, and I think their tagline is like just orange juice or just oranges and water.
Yeah.
And there's a class action that says, well, no, they're not advertising accurately because there's PFAS, and they're using a water supply that has PFAS. And
I just thought it was interesting. I was like, they're on plates too?
Yeah, products, but that Teflon coating, whether it's cookware or waterproof clothing, and then firefighting foam is the big one. Okay. That's just been used anywhere near airports. If you have a well near an airport, really high possibility of contamination, especially a commercial airport or an Air Force bases. The levels there are thousands of parts per trillion, much higher than we see in most of the municipalities.
Let's talk about the lawsuit. What is the PFAS lawsuit?
Yeah, PFAS lawsuit is what we call an MDL, a multi-district litigation. It's a federal lawsuit. So the idea is, instead of having a few cases in every federal court in the United States, they consolidate all the cases. And this MDL is in Charleston, South Carolina, and it's been going on for a number of years. There's different parts to it. There's the municipal water claims, which have been partially settled. There's the personal injury claims, which started with firefighters, but also can be drinking water near contamination sources. And then there will be a third prong of the MDL that will involve contaminated sites like airports.
Okay, so I'm really breaking this down today, but let's talk about it again. How do PFAS chemicals get into the water?
Yeah, so it's water flows everywhere. How do things get into the water? I think the most common way that PFAS get in the water is from a airport of some sort, or a firefighting foam training facility where firefighting foam gets sprayed onto the ground. It rains, it goes down through the ground into the groundwater, and then once it's in the groundwater moves. And for our purposes, the PFAS chemicals do not break down. So for example, if you have even gasoline or something like that and it goes into the water, it deteriorates, or it's not there forever. It's there for a period of time, and
But these are forever chemicals, so they're not breaking down.
Yeah,
so they have to go somewhere.
Yeah, and they do break down in some ways, but you talk about a half-life. So what's a half-life? A half-life is the chemical breaks in half, and there's half as much of it in a certain amount of time. The half-life of some of these PFAS chemicals is 1,000 years. So if you put an ounce of it in the water today, 1,000 years from now, there's half an ounce.
Right. So in our case, they're forever.
For our purposes, it's forever enough.
Right. All right.
And that means the levels never go down. So even though the levels are low, we got to deal with this and get it out and not only not drink, ingest, bathe in, breathe the steam from this water, but also stop putting the stuff into the water, which is, I think you heard it here first, maybe. It's going to be water outflows are going to be tested right now. So sewage treatment plants, right now there's no standard for putting things back into the water. That's going to be next in my prediction.
To change, yeah.
Yeah, there's also, I think, going to be some testing around dumps because all these things that have been thrown in the dump, whether it's old carpets that have old cookware, old clothing that have PFAS, as they leach, the other stuff in the dump breaks down, it leaches out. Where does all the stuff go?
Right.
It gets into the water in the breakdown, and then you're going to have dump sites, whether they're major landfills. And I think there's PFAS probably going to get into the water from those sites at some point. And I think, hopefully the dumps are appropriately monitored at this point.
Yeah. So this is probably self-explanatory at this point, but does PFAS cause cancer?
PFAS certainly causes some cancers. The only question is, how many does it cause? Is it 6, 7, 10, 12 different kinds of cancer? I'll defer to the scientists on that, but we'll put a list up of the cases that we're taking. We're representing people that have cancer and have PFAS exposure, and try to share the resources that we've come across through our representation.
How many Americans do you think have been exposed to PFAS?
I think conservative estimates are there's PFAS in about half the water in the United States. So you've certainly been exposed. I mean, if you've traveled at all, you've drank water in different locations, bathed in different water, taken showers at a hotel, you've been in different places. Generally, we're seeing higher PFAS levels near more industrial areas. older places. There's less PFAS generally in the Adirondack Mountains than there is in New York City.
Okay, right.
You talk about really contaminated areas, areas that have major industry, but sometimes the water supply. So, for example, even cities that we live in, Rochester or Buffalo, old school blue collar towns that have a lot of industry and have some contamination, whether it's from Kodak or Bethlehem Steel or something like that. But we're drawing our water off of the Great Lakes. So the water itself is relatively clean, even though the land can be pretty contaminated.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's just from the water, not even like the non-stick stuff or anything like that. But I
think that the other thing that we're really interested in all the time is our veterans and our people who served in the military, even non-veterans, but civilians who served on military bases. Fires are bad for soldiers, right? So they've been a lot of people trained in how to put out fires. A fire on a Navy ship is not a good thing. Everybody gets trained in putting out fires. Well, what that means is there's been a hell of a lot of training with AFFF and firefighting foam on military bases for 50, 60, or 70 years. And they keep putting it on the ground, I think, and the Department of Defense has said that their Superfund sites set up various military bases have been very contaminated. And then just because the base is contaminated, does that mean the water supply is contaminated? Not necessarily. Are the bases using public water? Some are, some aren't, most aren't. So that's another area that we're investigating, is the contamination of the water supplies and the land on military bases, especially Air Force bases.
How much PFAS is dangerous?
I don't think there's any safe amount of PFAS exposure. The EPA is coming out with a standard of 4 parts per trillion. It's a question of amount, but do you want to consume PFAS? No, you don't.
Mm-hmm. Why are PFAS called forever chemicals?
Yeah. PFAS is kind of the umbrella that's used for a number of different chemicals, the most common of which is PFOS and then PFOA. And they are called forever chemicals because they don't break down in the natural environment very well. Will they break down? Scientists think they'll break down over the course of between 1 and 10,000 years. So for our purposes, the levels of PFAS in the environment don't go down. And as you keep using PFAS and introducing it into the environment, the levels continue to go up. And that's a problem because science has shown that PFAS causes things like cancer.
Right. Like within our lifetime, the level won't go down. If anything, it's going to go up.
I can tell you right now it's going to go up because there's still PFAS in firefighting foam. There's still PFAS in waterproof clothing. Mm-hmm. And there's PFAS in dumps. There's PFAS in rugs. It's in our environment, and whatever it's held in, whatever product it's contained in will break down, and the PFAS has to go somewhere.
Right. How can you remove PFAS from drinking water?
So there's a few different ways you get PFAS out of drinking water. For our purposes, either active carbon filtration, which in my opinion is more effective at a lower contamination level, and then reverse osmosis will get everything. I mean, essentially you're producing water without anything else, reverse osmosis. Active carbon works well, but you then end up with the carbon filtrate itself, and that's infused with PFAS, and you got to do something with that. And if there's a lot of PFAS in it, you go through a lot of it. It's expensive, and you have to get rid of. It kind of looks like carbon dust,
okay,
or carbon sand. Mm-hmm. I guess is the filter that goes in the water filtration system at the municipal plant.
Are PFAS chemicals still used?
PFAS chemicals are still used. There's been a lot of developments recently. States are starting to enact laws, phase outs of PFAS in waterproof clothing. And the biggest one is the Department of Defense has agreed to a phase out plan of certain types of firefighting foam.
Okay.
And the question is the new type of firefighting foam any more healthy? Well, we don't know. We don't know.
TBD.
But yeah, PFAS are out there.
How long does PFAS stay in your system?
PFAS can stay in your blood for a very long time, maybe forever, at least partially. The levels can go down if you stop the exposure. The biggest exposures that I know of are contamination sites, like Air Force bases or firefighters who are exposed to the foam on a regular basis. And we can really tell pretty accurately from a blood test what type of exposure a person's getting.
So who can file a PFAS lawsuit?
We are representing municipalities who have positive tests for PFAS in their water, who have an airport or a contaminated site, training site, something like that. And then we're representing individuals who have illnesses related to PFAS exposure. The list is there. And generally that is firefighters. That's how we started our involvement in PFAS, AFFF, firefighters, and cancer, but also individuals probably on military bases or from a known contamination site that were exposed to high levels of PFAS in their water.
How much is the PFAS lawsuit payout?
So it's a great question.
Yeah.
We never know what cases are worth, and it's until they're over. But you talk about the way we come up with damages in any case is the pain and suffering that a person went through. And we're talking about very serious injuries, very serious illnesses, strong science that shows the relationship between chemicals produced by chemical companies and individuals. You talk about firefighters, first responders, who are people trying to serve the community and are exposed to toxic chemicals. Past cases will give us some guidance of what potential settlement values are, but I think we're minimally talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you talk about what someone's life worth. What is the suffering from cancer worth? You also, one of the considerations that plaintiffs' law firms always have is it doesn't do anyone any good if the companies go bankrupt. And you're talking about major corporations here, these chemical producers, which is not good, but the financial resources are good. When you talk about a 3M, a DuPont, a Dow, BASF, these are major corporations that have, I think they're actively engaged in trying to resolve their liability at this point.
So who are you suing in these water cases?
We're suing the chemical companies, the companies that produce PFAS. And what we're generally saying is the chemical companies knew or should have known that the product would exist in the environment for a long time and it would pose health risks to the people, and they need to be compensated for the injuries that they've had, or cleaning up the water supply for the municipalities, producing safe water for all the residents to drink and bathe in.
Gotcha. And then what is a PFAS claim?
A PFAS claim most likely would be a lawsuit submitted in the multi-district litigation in South Carolina claiming exposure to PFAS and injury because of that exposure.
Great. So, don't know from all these questions being answered, PFAS is not good. PFAS is bad.
Yeah, read your water supply. I mean, the thing it's amazing. We represent all these municipalities and we were getting all this information. And the thing, I think we live in New York, and we have a fair bit of government here in New York, more than I would generally like most of the time. But there was a law that was passed about 5 years ago that required municipalities to test for PFAS, and that was a good thing. That's a good thing, and there's a tremendous amount of information for people in some states, but not in other states, that talk about what's in your water. I mean, we're looking at PFAS as part of this case, but you read the municipal water report. Every single municipality in New York issues one of these. I didn't even know they were out there till we got, and it talks about, has there ever been a positive test for lead? Has there ever been a positive test for high levels of chlorine? Where does the water come from? How much water is produced? How much does it cost? I mean,
Right.
There's a lot of information, and it's really something that affects everybody's life every single day.
Yeah. Well, knowledge is power. So
Read your water report. If your municipality doesn't issue one, they should.
Ask for it. Yeah.